Good morning. How are you, Josie?
Oh, I'm fine. I can't complain. I will complain.
That's what the show's about. That's part of its theme, isn't it? It starts off with a moment of complaint, but by the end of it, it's elation. We go on a full John Hughes narrative arc. That's the idea. When we were just talking before we started about that yesterday, I noticed again there was a kind of it felt that in that 6th week, people had really been hit by a level of gloom, but
even just hearing
the loss of sun.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, sorry. Just hearing the 6th week, it's like, yeah, that's long. That's long. That's a lot of time.
But that is, I think, just the lack of sun coming through a window had an enormous, and that's again the interesting thing with this period of time, which is minor changes that would normally go. Well, not minor changes; it's quite a major change, weather, all that kind of thing, and the basic, the nature of the atmosphere and the planet and all that kind of stuff. But we haven't got time for that. I'll let Brian Cox deal with that on another day. But it's but those things are going. Oh, there's right. The light has changed. I needed that light. I didn't realise how much that form of light was vital for a sense of contentment.
Completely. This is why my ankle, I swear to God, I'm gonna get it sawn off and get a wooden one in place just to teach it a lesson.
And also for a brilliant show and tell. Nothing would be better than as I see you picking up. Is that a blooded foot? It's my blooded foot.
Yeah. So that's good.
Have you got? We should tell everyone what we've got today. We've got Sara Pascoe's with two guests from the first week, actually, which is great to have back. We've got Sara Pascoe with us again, who is now fully recovered. The last time we had her on, she was not. We'll find out about all of those things. But now she's fully well, and with luck, her beautiful dog will keep wandering past her webcam, which it's been doing in the last 15 minutes in so many different angles from his master's voice, and also we have Luke Wright, the poet Luke Wright, is going to be joining us. Mentioned that tomorrow we've got Marcus Brigstock and Rachel Parris, and then on Friday we have Pragya Agarwal, who has written a fantastic book about unconscious biases called Sway, and also the psychologist Richard Wiseman. And I'll get all the housekeeping out the way, and there's a tip jar at the bottom, and we use that to kind of build up a fund for people in the arts, and also for art centres and other institutions, etc., to try and make sure that they're still able to open when all of this is over and done with. And I've just been told my friend about sorry.
We also have Steve Pretty tomorrow, founder of the Hackney Colliery Band. Is that what it's called? The Incredible
Yeah, the Hackney Colliery Band, yeah.
And we have Uncle Frank from the Fun Loving Criminals on Friday, which, what a treat. Who would have thought you and I would be hosting Uncle Frank from the Fun Loving Criminals?
I have to say, one of the most amazing moments, I don't know if you were at Glastonbury that year, was the Fun Loving Criminals. I think they headlined the Sunday, as far as I remember. This must have been late 90s. And halfway through their set, everyone's leaping around, and everyone's in that wonderful where they've been in a field for 3 to 4 days, where they've entered a new kind of, even without any form of pharmaceuticals, there is still the sleeplessness, the amount of kind of, music and all of those things that have gone on. You get to a different level of kind of strange, tired reverie. And halfway through their set, they then just did about a 10-minute reenactment of a scene from Scarface. And it was, I've never seen a kind of a short play being done on the Pyramid stage before, and it was highly impressive. I think if they'd done that on Friday, it wouldn't have worked so well, but on Sunday, people were open to so many different forms of art.
People would be thrilled. Absolutely. How are you? What's your show and tell today, Robin?
My show and tell is Jeff Towns, our friend Jeff Towns, who runs the Dylan's Mobile Book shop, which is fantastic, out of a mobile library and old mobile library. And you can actually go on. He's on Instagram and Facebook, and if you go there, Jeff is putting up 9 new books every single day. He has such an interesting. I've bought. You'd love this one, Josie. This is one that I bought from him recently. This is from the early 70s, The Great Brain Robbery. This is from the popular publishers Moss Side Press Limited, kind of somewhere between libertarians and anarchists, and it's about the nature of the education system.
You can be both.
Yeah. The lots of kind of he's got loads of interesting things. And I noticed the other day that in one of the shots that he put up, there was this thing here, Anne Sexton Support Group. And I was immediately fascinated because Anne Sexton was a fascinating poet who sadly killed herself, and I just wondered what it was. And so this is a single poem from hazardpress.co.uk. And there we go. It folds out beautifully. There, Wraiths is the name of the poet, and then it is just inside is a poem. So this is a poem where I meet Anne Sexton, where I'm 3 years old and lost. I'm 3 years old and lost, and she picks me up in the foyer of the Royal Festival Hall in London. Anne Sexton picks me up when I run away from my mother in the foyer of the Royal Festival Hall, and I run straight into the sheer legs of Anne Sexton, talking to men, a circle of men around her. I run straight into her legs, and she laughs, and it goes on. It's just a very, I love these kind of, it's a beautifully made piece of work, just a single poem. And then I was interested, I just read this morning, in the back it gives a little bit of the background about Anne Sexton, who was apparently heckled by W.H. Auden in one of her first appearances. And then it does also have a connection to also kind of various groups, mental health care groups, and suicide awareness groups. It just said this pamphlet is the first in a series of texts informed by a voice coming from him, a work in progress looking at the long-term effects of childhood bullying, homophobia and teenage suicide, and how we can support people experiencing similar situations. And it has a connection at the bottom to Maytree.org.uk, which is a really great charity, which someone I know, a friend of mine, works for, and it's to give people, young people who are feeling suicidal, it gives them 5 days in this kind of this house where they just have whatever attention or whatever need might be seen as being helpful. So Maytree, if you don't know about Maytree, but anyways, it had for a very small piece of paper turned into wonderful shapes and with words in it, it had a lot of information. So that's the Anne Sexton support group, and do find out more about Maytree, because it does, I know it does really, really good work.
That's really cool. And it's really putting into perspective how frivolous my one is.
Oh, I'm sorry if it's not another dinosaur, is it?
No, it's this. Somebody came to my show in Reading, and they made a tea towel of my face. And I forgot that it was, so I ended up using it and washing it in the washing machine, which has really, really made it washed out, which is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But what I like about it is it actually kind of looks like my face, like it's not trying to flatter me or anything. And I like it because I was like, oh yeah, that looks like me. I mean, obviously I don't have as many kind of clear horizontal, vertical wrinkles, but it's actual face size. Look at that.
I love it. I love the idea of the tea towel of Dorian Gray. And Dorian's just, what do you mean you put the tea towel in the dishwasher? Dorian, are you all right? Not anymore. That's wonderful. I love that kind of, I mean, you've always had such interesting things where people will just kind of go, hope you don't mind, made you this. Yeah. This kind of that make and do thing. That is a lovely tea towel. You're very tired today, aren't you?
I am, because I tell you why. I did this gig last night and I had so much adrenaline afterwards. I was lying in bed and I was just like, ah! Because I guess it's just not the same doing it online.
But it is still vital, isn't it? Because that's what I found yesterday, because it was raining. I didn't have a chance to do as much kind of exercise as I normally do, which meant I was far more annoying to live with between 8 and 11, the traditional adrenaline burst showing off time for all of us. And normally I think, because I've done enough exercise that I've just managed to take the edge off that, just a few stupid voices and improvisations, turning just on. Give me a place, give me a celebrity, and give me an object. Right, let's see what I can do. Dad, we just watched The Simpsons. No, let me do some improv. I'll probably try and do something. But yeah, I think you're right. And so I think I had that one day where what is the biggest burst of adrenaline once you've actually started? So not your early gigs, because I was thinking that the huge burst of adrenaline that I found was impossible to get rid of the first time of doing the show set list, where you're given, for those who don't know, basically up on a screen come different kind of phrases or a single word or whatever, and then you have to improvise around it, but not as in that kind of, I'm finding an improv. You have to pretend these are the routines you do every single night, so you have to deliver them with a real kind of chutzpah as well. And that is, you've done that.
I quite like that show because I think the pressure's off. Because if it's crap, people end up just being like, well, you did do it. And you're like, I did. It was terrible. Also, I think sometimes your brain just gifts you things in that environment. Your brain will just be like, okay, fine, I've made that connection for you. There you go. And you're like, oh, thank God. So I find it quite thrilling. The worst adrenaline I've ever had was before I was doing, it's a long time ago in Australia, there was a TV show where you had to improvise, where they basically drop you into a scene and it's called Thank God You're Here. And everyone goes, oh, thank God you're here. Yeah. And I remember sitting backstage thinking, I'm going to break my arm because that's the only way I'm going to get out of this. Like, being the most frightened I've ever felt before going on stage and being like, I need to break my arm because that's the, I can't do this. If I break my arm, I'm not at fault. I can't be in trouble, and then I'll be able to get out of this. So that's what I really remember.
Oh, because I think any of those because I think one time I did set list, it was like Dylan Moran was on, Greg Proops was on, and you get a different form of adrenaline, that normal fear pre-gig or whatever it is. And I did find I think Phil Jupiter's described set list as catnip for comedians, and I remember that after the first time of doing it and having a lot of fun doing it, and then one comedian, when you find out comedians don't necessarily understand comedy, right? I ended up doing this routine involving Bertrand Russell's tricycle or something like that. Yeah, to be honest, I was lucky they were giving me stuff I'd written already. No, but I ended up, and occasionally I'd get angry with the audience going, I don't understand how you're not getting this. This stuff kills, right? Because I'm pretending that I normally have a routine. And then afterwards, this mate of mine went, oh yeah, you get a little bit angry with the audience. And I went, no, I was playing the part of someone who's doing their set list. And never mind. Anyway, there we are. I know someone else who's done set list. That's the best segue we can get.
We've got to mention. Beautiful segue.
I'm going to ruin the segue though, because Trent, our producer, who generally we respect and admire, he always goes, mention the tip jar. And just as I was about to mention the tip jar, he went, oh, mention Uncle Frank, right? So that ruined it. Anyway, there's a tip jar, and we use it to get basically a resource for some of the people that we know who are kind of up against it at the moment. As you probably have read, that about 85% of comedians currently at the moment still haven't found any other way of kind of financial support, and so we're building up a resource to kind of help out some of those people, and also to help out some of the art centres. We've given to I think 5 or 6 art centres so far to give them a little bit of funding to help them keep going. So that's where the tip jar money goes. Right, happy now, Trent, our producer?
Poor Trent. Everyone's turning on each other. It's only been 6 weeks.
Late. Shut up, Josie.
Get him out for his run.
Where's his kettlebells? So we are joined by, and the terrible thing was, because I can see her on screen and no one else can, I could see that the adrenaline rose for her to get ready to do the on-screen face, and then we've gone off on a tangent, and now she's all over the shop.
14 minutes past 10.
Sara Pascoe. There we are. We did it.
Oh, hello. Yeah.
Hello. How are you?
It was really nice thinking of this. Yeah, I'm good, actually. I'm good. I have a thing on sunshine. I think that happens every year because we don't get done. The first few days, late April, early May, it's just the best feeling. It makes you feel proud to be British. Everyone in London, it makes you feel hopeful about the summer. They always go away, and then you remember, oh no, this is Britain. Why did I get tricked into thinking we were a Mediterranean country?
Yes, there is always like the secret good week.
Yeah, and it just makes you go, oh, it's all going to be okay. And it's literally just sunshine.
It's like if you're watching an election and the results come in, but there are only like 5 constituencies and it's like 100% good.
Red. And you go, oh my God, I dreamed of this.
Yeah. And then you go to bed and you're like, well, I'm sure this is fine.
Yeah. The exit polls were really wrong.
Yeah, that's a horrible thing. At 2 minutes past 10, Rotherham call it. Oh, Rotherham's gone to Labour, so everyone's going to go to Labour. There we are. Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Night.
Let's stop the block universe there.
So you're feeling better. Were you ill?
Yeah. I was ill for a couple of weeks right at the beginning of lockdown with something, obviously it's not confirmed, but I think I had the virus and my boyfriend had it as well. So I was ill for a couple of weeks, but now I'm much, much better. And I think I've got used to being inside all the time. I think I've got Stockholm syndrome now for staying in and reading in the bath.
It does make going outside feel really odd and like makes everything smaller, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the end of the road is so far.
I had to go to Guildford appointment, and so I had to go on public transport, and you have to show people the proof that you have a medical reason to go. And I felt naughty the entire time. I felt like, and then I only felt safe when I got back to the house.
That must have been really, gosh, I'm like wow, you went
I know.
all the way to Guildford.
Guildford, I know, and also I can't describe to you how strange it was being, because obviously everyone there is a kind of a key worker, someone who has to go into work, and everyone was so distant. But I'm glad I saw it because it's so creepy and it's like the end of the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I feel like such a village rube because I'm like, oh my God, tell me more about this tube you were on. My daughter is getting so exposed situation that yesterday she said to me, can we go in a car?
Oh,
She's
wow.
two, like, can we go in a car? And I had to go like, later. Yeah, she's not been on any wheeled vehicle bar the pram for 2 months.
Yeah, and even she's had enough, but she's just bored at 2. Yeah.
She's like, let's get in a cab, Mum.
Yeah. Does she want one of those ones where you put the money in, though, like a fairground, like a supermarket car, not just like an Uber?
I wonder if they're allowed. No.
So you'd have to buy your own one. I'm sure there is someone in kind of Angel that has one in their garden.
Imagine buying your own one. Put £1 in every time.
Yeah.
Someone coming and collecting the money.
Yeah.
I think there's a Ken Loach film about that. It's really sad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It really got me. I had to turn it off for a bit because all their pounds.
So you're reading a lot. What have you read in lockdown that you've enjoyed?
Oh, I've read so many books that I've enjoyed. I'm currently reading this. I bet Robin's already read this.
I've got it. Is it the Sapolsky one? Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Robin, you're gonna. It's so good, and it covers absolutely everything. And there's so many studies in it I'd never heard of. There were so many kind of studies after studies, and the things where it was replicated, and it's everything really that we're kind of. Robin and I were talking, Joe, just before you came on about the rise in domestic violence with the lockdown, and that's something that I think all of us find, if we haven't experienced it, so unfathomable. How can one person seem in real life to be high functioning good person and at home become a terrorist to somebody? It's those kind of behaviors that he's kind of talking about, kind of from an evolutionary perspective, but also understanding the brain and chemicals and the things that might cause it. Anyway, it's so good. So I'd really recommend this to anybody who wants a really fantastic non-fiction book. And that book Sway, you're talking to the author of Sway. I've just been sent that. That looks amazing.
Yeah, no, I really I thought it was very, very interesting. I read it a while ago, and it would say unraveling unconscious.
Which is such an interesting thing, because it doesn't matter what your belief system is. That then means you have biases in the rest of your life, and all of us think we're kind of above that, and it doesn't affect us. And that kind of thing.
That's what it is. I think one of the reasons the book is great is because it is, you're constantly aware. It gives you that kind of, not that hypervigilance is a good thing, but it does make you go, hang on a minute, I have to think about what my reality has been.
Yeah.
And start to just see if I can at least do a kind of thought experiment to step out of it. Why do I have these presumptions? Or even, again, those unconscious things where you realise that in the community you were brought up in, just because it's a bit like that thing when people go, oh, well, look, you're having a go at the headline, but that's not what the article says. Now, as we know from research, that the headline is the most important thing. So even the act of walking into a newsagent, in the old days did that, even the act of seeing those headlines, that is going in. There is a little bit which is just slightly swaying you. And I think, those things are... But yeah, the Sapolsky book, I read the first 100 pages, and it's a huge book, isn't it?
Yeah, I dropped it in the bath, so it's bigger now. It got swollen.
That's what I love about you. Is I always can tell if you've really enjoyed a book, because you immediately place it in water, hoping it will take even longer to finish. It's an even bigger book now.
And you have to be so gentle with the soggy pages.
Yeah.
Makes me read slower.
Oh, nothing breaks my heart more. Well, lots of things do actually, Dan.
Yeah.
But when you've got a lovely book that you love, and on the first day you decide to read it in the bath, and you're clumsy and you drop it in there. I had my copy of Richard Feynman's Pleasure of Finding Things Out.
Found out not to read it in the bath.
But you, Sarah, I think you. It might be true actually of all three of us that a lot of your life is doing is working out, doing homework about everything.
Yeah,
because, like that's what
independent researcher.
Yeah, you go. I want to know more about that. Well, I'll pretend I'm going to be doing a stand-up show about that, which might actually be a stand-up show, and therefore this is now not fun reading, though it is fun.
It is fun, yeah.
Special homework.
Yeah. I think sometimes that books are our newspapers. Like, I don't want necessarily an easier to digest version. I want to go to like the source and go, okay, tell me the actual study they did, and then I'll decide. Yeah.
Well, that is always I think over the years, talking to more and more scientists, that realization that more often than not, newspaper article about a piece of research, as you said,
so
just
terrible.
Skip that. I mean, it's quite hard as well, because some stuff, like even in magazines like Nature, for those of us who are not scientists but have an interest, it can be very, very dense, and it can have a language which is not a language we use. So it is a great thing, especially because of social media. You can access lots of researchers and say, can you basically translate this from your perspective as a scientist and researcher?
Yeah, that's what's great about kind of popular science writing, because I think it's always aimed at people who are interested, but it doesn't assume you have any kind of knowledge. I think that's what's brilliant about books like that and writers like that. I'm reading the Bernardine Evaristo book as well. Have you read that one? The one that won the Booker Prize? It's really brilliant.
I read Mr. Loverman. He's great. That's the first one of hers that I read. But I've not read this one. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's very, very now, and it's lots and lots of different characters. And so far, they're all black women who live in London. They come from kind of all different backgrounds, economically, creatively. And so it's a really, really enjoyable read. You miss every character when you move on to the next one. But there's a lot of social commentary in there, and I wouldn't say that it's buried. It's more like you're having a conversation with someone who has strong opinions because she's a student at Oxford for the first time, and kind of judging the establishment. Woman, girl, other, or girl, woman, other. Yes, the one that won the Booker Prize. Yeah, it's really good, and it's a really easy to read. Kind of That's
kind of isn't it? Feels like a wonderful romp, but is also
a pleasure. A pleasure to read is what I should have said. Not easy, a pleasure to read. I wanted to go back, trying to see what else is on the pile. I read a book that you recommended on Book Shambles. Richard Brannigan, The Abortion.
Richard Brautigan.
Brautigan. Yeah, I read it on.
I was going to say Noel Fielding. I think that was probably on. He loves absolutely adores Richard Brautigan. Yeah.
I bought it ages ago when I heard that Book Shambles, and then it's so small. I thought, I'll read a small book, and I couldn't believe how good it was. Like how funny and exciting, and again that felt like a huge social commentary, while never ever trying to be. I thought it was so good. Yeah, I've got trout fishing as well that I'll read now.
That's great.
That's the odd thing, though, isn't it? Which is, I think there's a lot of author where you go, I must get, and it's the same with films as well. Eventually, because it's a good thing to do, and you kind of made the presumption that it's going to be work, and then you'll be able to talk about it, and then you go, there's a reason people have been banging on about this for 4 years. There's a reason that people love this, and they don't just love it because they go, I actually am a big fan of Tarkovsky. They love it because they go, bloody hell, this is amazing. But I think there is a slight problem sometimes, and I think within our world, it's where we are caught between, you've got what I would call the world of the London Review of Books, where you kind of go, I would never be able to write a book that would ever get reviewed in that, or, in the kind of people, the way that those people talk would be, I've had that where at Hay once, where, they said, come to this party. I was like, and I went there and I had this person going, hello, what do you do? And I went, comedy, and I do some science shows. What science shows do you? I'll do a thing on Radio 4. What is it then? It's called The Infinite Monkey Cage. I listen to the Life Science scientific with Jim Al-Khalili, you know, so you always feel like a cheap turn, but every now and again you mention something that's kind of considered to be higher culture. So then the other cheap turns also consider you to be a pretentious arse as well.
Yeah.
You can't actually hang around with the pretentious arses. Yeah. It's kind of caught not quite in the lovely world of the cheap turn. You go, I'm an imposter in everything, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what any of that had to do with anything.
Well, you made me remember I went to Hay once, and I've only ever once been invited to a party, and I just kind of stood on the edges feeling very like, you know, because you're by yourself. I was by myself, but the dance floor had Salman Rushdie dancing with Benedict Cumberbatch, and that's the best thing I'll ever see in my life.
Can you remember what they were dancing to?
Yeah.
Come on, Eileen.
So are you researching something at the moment, because you've just had your second book, Animal, was out
Sex, Power, Money. We were supposed to have the paperback out in May, but it's been moved to August. I'm researching kind of loosely, like I think I'm going to write a book about murder and the things you can learn from murder, because that's the thing I'm most interested in, actually. And there's lots of really interesting social aspects. There's really interesting the law of murders. You know, the fact that like cuckold's defence used to exist, where if you came back and your partner, your wife, was cheating on you, you were allowed to kill her, and that was a valid defence. And so there's things that are really interesting about the history of it and what that says about how society used to be structured. But there are things even now, you know, like the gay panic defence. For a really long time, if a man felt that another man was coming on to him and he killed him, that was seen as reasonable behaviour.
But also people would then obviously as you know. Of
course, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a thing now, because trans people have a very, especially trans women, a very, very high rate of murder, much, much higher than the rest of the population. Sex workers have a much more in danger of being murdered than anyone else. And both of those, the reasons behind those things are really interesting. So that's what I'm interested in at the moment, but I haven't started writing anything. Just listening to lots of murder podcasts.
It's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because I remember when I was kind of Brian Masters, who wrote the book about Dennis Nilsen, Killing for Company.
Oh yeah,
which is a good
book. Yeah,
he was originally a kind of more of an academic, writing books about Camus and stuff like that. Mm. And I started to read more of those books, and then very quickly found out that it takes, I suppose, like every genre, it takes a long time to find a book where you go, oh, this is actually written from a place which is psychologically interesting, which is not merely because I think it's a hard. I was just seeing that is it Hallie Rubinold?
Oh yes,
just,
The Five.
Her book, The Five, and where sometimes removing what eventually becomes the glamour of the murderer. And when you do read from Deborah Delano wrote a great novel which is kind of partly based on the Yorkshire Ripper.
Oh,
but it's very much, the perspective, we see so much through the eyes of the sex workers who, and other victims. Yeah. And it totally changes the story. It totally changes.
It's also much more interesting, the social commentary, like why are certain people vulnerable. So the Yorkshire Ripper is a very interesting thing, and also especially because how did he evade, because he was interviewed so many times by the police, but it's actually much more interesting to look at what it says about society than just one person. But people can't help being fascinated with a serial killer in particular, because we want to know what makes a person like that, because I can't imagine it, I guess. So there is I think we can't help being fascinated. But the people who have been killed by them have their own really valid, really interesting stories. The Five is that's another book that you just tear through. That's the Hallie Rubenfeld one. It's really, really, really interesting.
What's that one about?
So Ripperologists hate her. So she's written a book. She's written a book researching the 5 canonical victims of Jack the Ripper, and she has some really interesting theories. So, for instance, in terms of like sex work or prostitution or being trafficked, all of those things back then, they weren't exactly as we'd understand now, because some of those women may occasionally have sold sex out of desperation or for a bed, or they'd have had like very short-term relationships. But being an unfortunate in Victorian times just meant you weren't with your husband. So they were all alcoholics, all 5 of the women, and they all occasionally rough slept. And her theory is that Jack the Ripper kills women who were drunk and asleep on sleeping rough, and that's why they were so quick, and that's why nothing was ever heard. Because a couple of the victims, even in their court cases, their family, their partner, other people around said they weren't prostitutes. So the press spun a story really early on. There was an angry man who was trying to clear the streets of prostitutes. And so that seeing the media's role in it as well, because they sold so many papers. This was like the beginning of just like, doesn't matter what it is to do with this story, let's just print it, let's just hawk it out. And so they created a narrative which then fed into a whole thing, and the women's actual lives were completely irrelevant, really. And it's really interesting because women then couldn't rent houses, couldn't own property. If your husband died, and you kind of often had nothing. If your family kicked you out, it's really difficult because we always impose our own societal structure. You realise, oh, what would happen to you or I now if our partner died, or we got kicked out of the house for drinking too much? Isn't what happened back then. So that's it's so well researched.
Also, just so interesting, and also so shocking to think that this, after all this time, is a new angle. You know?
Yeah. And it's just interesting to think about. And then there's some people who have criticised her, saying, stop saying that sex work is bad by defending these women saying they weren't sex workers. And that's not what she's doing. She's actually trying to make you put it in a context of understanding, because it's not what we imagine.
I was chatting to a guy who works in a prison, and he said one of the things that, because I think so through cinema very often is such an elevation of mass murderers, serial killers. They're turned into strange, charismatic figures and all of these. And he said the thing is that of the people he'd worked with who'd committed, he said most of them, he said, are just incredibly boring people. They're very, very boring, and there is no, and the act they committed, there is then no, some, you know, it's, and I think it's a very, you know, it's a strange, and it's interesting to see more authors now. I think that there's someone who recently wrote a book about Sandy Hook, and he basically removed it's not about the person who committed the act, it's about all of the other people involved in that, and all the ramifications. And I think that's kind of quite an important narrative.
That sounds so interesting. I think because that's actually another area where we get sucked in, like the idea of modern Nazis and those websites and the things that they write and how they collude with each other. It's another kind of like one of those dark black holes that you end up going down, because you are so interested, like, where does that come from? How do you start off a kind of miserable teenager? We were all miserable teenagers. But if you get a certain kind of information or stimulation, you go down that route. Yeah,
we'll come back and we'll talk more about this. And it's we're going to pop over and see Luke Wright, who's joining us. We're going to have a quick. And I'll just mention, by the way, the novel that I mentioned by Deborah Delano is called The Saddest Sound. And I thought it was a very, very interesting. And also, I mean, it's interesting. Anyone who's not yet read, and I know there'll be quite a few, Alan Moore's Jerusalem. Again, there's some very interesting, in the early chapters of that as well. The way that he's. I mean, I think he's so good, as many great writers are, at taking you into someone else's mind and giving you a sense of someone else's sometimes very difficult and problematic lives and experience. And he's brilliant for that. Luke Wright, good morning. Can you hear me? How are you?
I can hear.
Oh, you're
fine. Yeah, I'm good. I'm so tall. Are you not hearing me? Okay.
No, you're coming through. You know what? Normally there's a little bit of fragmentation at the beginning, so apologies to everyone for that. But you will. I'm sure it's going to be fine. You're doing about. Is it a gig every single night?
Every single night. Yes, I've just done 41. 41 night was last night. I'm keeping them. Yeah, because I said I'd do this. Will be great when I'm hitting gig 100. That'll be really impressive. But I've forgotten that it's a slog, isn't it? As you know, Robin. As you know, Josie.
Yeah, there are, but it does that giving you some framework for the day. I think. Have you found that even though I'm sure there's some evenings where you go, do you know what? It's not there today. I don't fit, but like gigging generally when you're on tour. There are times that you get to a town, you think, I don't think I've got that in me today. I don't want to go on. And then you go, it's fine. Good. I've done it. I have had that adrenaline, though. Of course, for Josie, that means she hasn't now slept for 24, 36 hours.
Yeah. Well, I of course you. I always have the 6 o'clock slump when you're sitting in a dressing room somewhere and it's cold and you're a long way from home, and that's quite miserable. And obviously that doesn't happen so much here, because at 6 o'clock I'm still giving my kids dinner and or sitting down, and it's nice to be at home. But then it's a funny thing when you come off stage, so to speak, because then you have all that sort of post gig sort of adrenaline, like you were talking about earlier on. And what do you do with that? Well, I just go online again and here at my desk. So that's not so good. So I don't know, trying to sort of maintain a home lifestyle with also trying to do gigs as well is I don't know. I'm getting there. Like, please, can you not hear me all right?
It's a little bit fragmented.
What I can do is I'll try taking these out to you. And I wonder if I can hear you.
Can you hear us now?
1 second, guys. Apologies for this.
This is so real, Josie.
No.
It's absolutely real, isn't it?
It's happening
now. It's happening right now, yeah.
On the speak. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Is that working?
Well, I was especially thinking that in some ways sentences are fine because they can be fragmented and we can manage to go. But poetry really does get affected by the loss of an occasional adverb.
I was trying to be clever and wear my little in the ear things, but there you go, full on my face. Can I enjoyed your show and tell earlier? I'll see your Jeff Towns item, and this is something that Jeff gave to me once, which is a press shot of Sir John Betjeman, which they've used for his book. So they've had a Tipex round the edge of his face. This is before we had sort of computer desktop publishing. So Jeff gave me that. I don't know what to do with it, but I have it.
It's great. I love that. That's the thing about Jeff, is he just has this archive every single day when he puts up stuff. There's always, and I also know how he manipulates. I don't know. I'm sure you found that. He knows who his purchases are going to be. He knows, and he'll go, that one will get Robin. That'll definitely yeah.
And Josie, I raise you this cushion. Oh, that somebody gave to me at a gig.
Is that hand embroidered?
There's a hand embroidered cushion of my face.
That's astonishing.
It's really astonishing.
And your
the best thing we can do
is
just sit on
when
it.
they're feeling particularly aggressive towards.
Yeah, we all take turns. Yeah, we all take turns to sit on Dad.
Oh, bad parenting isolation. The cushion is a great idea. See, that's one Jeff knew that I would, the moment he put that up, he thought, I know he's going to purchase About Spirits and Macumba there. And of course, there we are. That was, I love all those things. The festivals, of course, you are so much, that's where we normally meet up every year. We bump into each other 3 or 4 times.
We have a thing that you're like the groundhog to us, Robin. So once we've seen Rob and Ince for a year, that we know it's now summertime. So sometimes we have some really long summers because we see you at sort of in late March at Larne. So and I said to John Osborne, I said, summer is here, John. We've spotted the lesser spotted Ince. He's out and about. Summer can commence.
And he's tweeting away.
Yeah.
but that loss this year, because I mean, last year I think the first festival after Larne that we saw each other at would have been Port Eliot, which was going to be no more anyway.
Latitude, probably. Latitude, maybe.
And then there was
Glastonbury. Yeah.
Oh yes, you're right. I'm doing that the wrong order.
Yeah.
Those and this year, how do you feel about the fact that that's such a vital? When I see you wandering around a festival, you look so energized. You look, and it's a beautiful, thing as well. Which is a lot of the festivals. I was mentioning Jeff before, and when his book bus turns up, very often there'll be kind of impromptu, ad hoc poetry readings, and that gives a tremendous sense of possibilities.
And for us, we live quite solitary lives. I think when you get to the stage when you're doing your own tours and you're going to art centres and theatres and you're not doing a circuit so much, you don't see your colleagues and who are often your close mates and people you've known for many years. I've known you both of you guys probably for getting on for 20 years now. And it's like our annual general conferences, except there's many of them, and there's no seminars. We just get to get hammered and have a good time. And obviously I'm sad about that, but I think that's one of the reasons I immediately went, right, I'm going to do these gigs. It wasn't so much the structure is useful, but it was like I wanted to have something to look forward to. I wanted to be doing something rather than sitting here just crossing stuff out of my diary and feeling sad about it. So I'm trying not to dwell on it. It's nothing we can do. Thinking, my friend was talking to me on a video chat the other night, and she was going, let's plan the night out we're going to have when this is over. And I said, I don't want to, because it's just making me feel too sad, because I just don't know when that's going to be. So I'm trying not to think about it and trying to throw myself into writing new poems that I'm excited about, rather than feeling sad about the show that I wrote, spent a year writing, that probably will do very few gigs now.
Because I think I sometimes do get slightly annoyed with the fact that we've talked about this one before, there are a lot of people, and I think this is quite acceptable, there are a lot of people who are just saying, I'm not able to create anything, I'm not able to do anything, I'm not able to read anything, I'm finding it really hard. But there seem to be so many people saying, oh, well, that's totally understandable, there doesn't sometimes seem to be enough encouragement to say, you also don't have to feel guilty if you are creating things, and if you want to encourage people and say it's a difficult and it's a weird time, but if you can really break through it, it may give you something. So you don't have to just follow that narrative that says, no, just slump, just give up on it all, that's just the way it is. No. I think I understand that reaction, but I also think I wouldn't want that to be the kind of the go-to position that's it.
And I also know that if I let myself slump, I'm going to be a lot less. I'm keeping myself, even if I can't, write a poem or do something, achieve something, just going for a walk or trying to do a bit of yoga or sitting down and reading my book rather than just flicking through Twitter for an hour. Just little things like that. You've got to, what's that? And you action yourself into motivation and action yourself into inspiration. From there, the motivation to do something happens. So even if it's just forcing yourself to make a cup of tea and just get off the sofa and do stuff, it's good. Also, I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old who are with me 4 days a week now for homeschooling, so I'm achieving a lot less than I was when we were splitting it more equally before. But my ex-partner still, she's working full time, so she can't have the kids that much, so I've got them more, which is nice. It's nice, because I miss them when I'm away doing gigs and everything. So I think it's about accepting what has been forced upon us and making the best we can, rather than worrying about all things we can't do, because that's just kind of useless energy, I think. Useless worry.
Yeah, I feel like that because my son's 12, and I do realise that the period of time where he is just going to want to be in his bedroom and doing his own thing. So I'm kind of enjoying that, that, and I know I'm in a fortunate position to have that time and all of those things. But I am thinking, right, this is a thing where you go, right, this is an enforced, very strange working holiday.
It's a very different thing that I think, it's difficult having kids at home. It'd be, if you were in isolation, in lockdown with, in a new relationship that you're really excited about, that seems to me like the perfect kind of just the two of you having that. But then also having kids brings lots of fun and enjoyable things with it as well. And it takes you away from your adult worries, and you can just sort of throw yourself into their activities. So I think the thing is, it's just to look at, and obviously, like with us, all of our work's gone. So in that respect, we've been hit really, really hard. But then I look at where I am out here in a little town called Bungay out in Suffolk, where I'm 5 minutes walk from the fields, and so I feel like I rolled a 12 on that one. So some things I'm lucky about, some things I've been unlucky, and I'm just sort of trying to count my blessings best I can. But I think we're all able to feel quite miserable and quite down from time to time, can't we? It's just that's the way of things.
It's about trying to counteract as much as you possibly can, because that's the part to sort of fight against, not lean into.
Yeah, quite.
Access to those who are in the lucky position of having access to a slightly wider sky, out of cities and access to some form of field or whatever, or you just go, wow, the privilege, the delight.
Completely.
And to watch nature. You've got a couple of poems for you today. We'll do one at the end, but I wonder if
the first one now. I hope this isn't too sad for people, but this is to remind me that actually when I am out there gigging,
and living my best life, often that can not be the best thing either. So this is called a pub gig in the middle of nowhere, and it's about I've been doing a series of gigs in pubs the last couple of years for this group called the In Crowd, and they're lovely gigs, often mostly unticketed. So you just sort of stand in the bar room of a pub and you just do a gig, and it's terrifying because it's often not your crowd. It's just a bunch of people who are having a nice pint, but they generally go well anyway. This is called pub gig in the middle of nowhere. The locals take a pride in it. No commerce down these silted lanes. A coaching in that's still a coaching in. Fermented, sheltered under hops and shouldering its centuries with all the calm of village cricket. Blokes in whites and wives in hats on yeasty afternoons. And I'm here to spin them all some yarns, to tell them things they've known for years and hope the way I do it does the trick. An entertainment older than this horse-brassed hearth. And later in the garden, I meet Daniel. He'd sat there with his parents, sweet and still, all through my show. 7 years old, he tells me, cherub, almost rendered down to boyhood, and so much like my own son Sam, a milk-faced storm of cleverness and cheek, which comes at me now with questions like weapons. Eventually, his father picks him up, blows raspberries on his stomach, sits them at their table with some chips, and rips the ketchup sachet. Wholesome chores of parenthood.
Harsh ending, yeah. That's always one of those poets. Hello, Sarah. Welcome back.
Back.
There he is. It was. It created a tremendous sense of artistic suspense and artistic uncertainty, which I think in many ways was very fulfilling as well.
It was a real moment of an exit.
I've never seen someone storm off. Do you know, it's the first time we've had someone storm off going, I'll tell you what, they're not reacting to my poem, Howard Hope. I'm out of here.
Yes, carry on.
Okay, fine. Sorry about that. Eventually, his father picks him up, blows raspberries on his stomach, sits him at their table with some chips and rips the ketchup sachet. Wholesome chores of parenthood. It's 3 nights since I made a meal for mine. And from the car park, the high-wheeled fields are endless. In this middle of everywhere, I know the enormity of my choices, the wretched, minute realness of being lost at sea. I drive back down the sunken roads, tunnelled by trees that taught us a cold moon, and I my boys' car seats in the rear view, empty, and soon enough they'll go. But I'll still witness boys like Daniel, pulling at a hand in Sainsbury's, thwacking teaspoons on Formica and different strip-lit M4 chains. And perhaps those boys will haunt me, remind me of a time which I, through work and through divorce, have cleaved into, have taken half of. Dear God, only half. That's that.
Thank you, Lou.
Yes. Sorry to bring the mood down. I always forget how sad the end of that poem is, and then I get halfway through, and yeah.
Oh well, thank you very much. You're going to come back at the end of the show as well for another poem, and so we'll see you in about 5 or 10 minutes. Brilliant.
See you in a moment.
Thank you, Sarah. We picked up on this briefly before, and I just wanted, because I know that you know some resources. You were mentioning when talking about the Sapolsky book, Behave, about violence and domestic situations at the moment, because it is something, it's really the focus and it's not a discovery because we know these things, but again, these are moments of kind of a certain level of revelation when everyone is trapped in their own situation, and this, seeing in the news the rise in domestic violence and for young people as well, and children. What advice do you know in terms of where people can access the good information to know what to do? Oh, you're on mute at the moment, by the way, I think.
I think. So the main thing is that probably for all of us, awareness, because obviously the minute you come into a lockdown, for lots of us, our home is a haven and a safe place, even if we are trapped in it. But for lots of people, it isn't. And so the organisations that I've seen, so like Refuge is probably one of the most well-known. They look after women who are escaping domestic violence, and they have a phone line for people who are experiencing it. So that's one side of it. And being aware of your neighbours. And other people can report things if you hear something and you're worried, because it's not just the cases of domestic violence, also the deaths, it's murders have increased. people murdering their partners, and that's a very complicated thing because obviously it happens in homosexual relationships as well. It isn't something that only affects women, is the other thing. And so just in general, and all of the organisations who do support people have had all of their funding cut. They're already oversubscribed. So the terrible situation is if they're underfunded, there is nowhere for people to go. You can't kind of escape. And then going on along with that, you have the fact that there's a virus going on. I know that I've seen people sharing on social media, there's kind of codes that you can say. So because obviously people who were already getting support, like whether that was therapy or whether that was a support group, they now can't contact, they can't go out for a coffee with their support worker, things like that. So people have got this code about asking, have you seen this, Robin? Asking someone about, so basically if you text or tweet someone saying, are you still selling makeup, it means I'm in trouble. And if you say, I think it's about lipstick, then it means, can you call the police for me? And so don't quote me on that, people should look it up, but there is a way, if you are in trouble, letting people around you know. And I think the other thing is, all of us in our circles, what kind of happens with people who are being having this situation is that they become more isolated. They're pushed away from their family, their friends are rejected. So it might be, if there's someone like that in your circle, check in with them. If you feel a little bit like, oh, you've got someone who is in a relationship and they stopped contacting you, or they couldn't be on the phone. If you've got an inkling, it might just be checking in with people. And that, because it's a horrible thing to imagine, whether you're, for anybody stuck in a house with somebody who is unbalanced or aggressive or any of those things. And we'll probably only hear about it after all of this is done.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's really good advice. And again, like everything that a lot of the other things we talked about, that find reliable resources and sources of information. And we'll try and make sure we'll do a little bit more research, and we'll put something up under this as well with some information as well. So we'll try and get some of that. But also, if any of you have resources or know of institutions or organisations that can help, get in contact, and we'll make sure that we can kind of spread that.
I think it's a little bit important for some people to exercise compassion and suspend judgment a little bit if they, like, I've seen a lot of people on social media being very, very aggressively kind of deciding that they're the people who should be morally policing the lockdown, when actually they don't entirely understand what other people's circumstances are.
Yeah.
And they don't entirely understand what may or may not be happening for people. And so I think it's so useful to just take a step back from kind of deciding that this person shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z, or this person has no reason to be doing X, Y, and Z, and to sort of trust that actually, some people might be doing something, being out of the house, for example, for a reason which is entirely necessary, but which is not necessarily something that, that can easily be ticked off, And I think it is really important that people do understand that, like, different people's circumstances can also be, degrading to their lives in lots of ways, and like, not to go on and on at people and make it worse.
Compassion is exactly the right word, because I think the minute things become tough, whether it's economically or because people are scared of the virus, we are normally. And I know that there's really great acts of compassion and neighbourliness, but there's also a thing of looking at other people going, well, if I'm not allowed to do it, you shouldn't be allowed to do it. But actually what you should presume is everyone you see, if they're out in a park with their shirt off, just presume they live in a high block of flats and that's a key worker on their afternoon off. Just assume that. Just assume, rather than you thinking it's a selfish person who doesn't care for the well-being of our community. Assume the opposite. Think the best of people, because everyone is going through such a desperate time.
At best, completely. And I think it's important.
There's a few people I've met who've had that, or not met, communicated with, who've had that moment of saying, I was doing shopping for my 3 elderly neighbours and I had loads of shopping bags, and someone was shouting at me that I was a hoarder. That kind of, you might be shopping for someone. On the nice side of it as well, which is something that I've seen, when we were talking about compassion stuff, very often when I go for a walk, I've always been, because I was brought up in the countryside, I always go, hello or good morning. And people very often go, what on earth? Hello, good morning. What does hello, good morning mean? What does he know about me? Whereas I've found recently when I do my kind of little daily walk, people are the distance is kind of respected and everything. And there are some people I think fear hello or a nod or a smile for the fact that it might transfer whatever. But overall, I've seen a real rise in people happily going, that little bit of going, there's a little bit of communication there. And again, that's something that we hope can, when eventually there is some calming of this situation, the continuation, we don't have to return to, hello, good morning. We can return to, try and maintain that, the very small pieces of communication in those moments when we can be outside. I think some of them have really been heightened in a more positive way.
The trouble we've got, dogs have to be on a lead. And so we've got a mixture of people who are leaving their dog, taking their dog off the lead, and then busybodies saying your dog should be on a lead. But the trouble is, it's a common sense thing that lots of dogs, if they're on a lead, drag you towards another dog. So it's actually much less safe than just the dogs roaming around. But so we've got a real kind of divide. So walking the dog's very stressful now, because it's either you take the dog off the lead and risk being told off, or you leave him on the lead and then my dog jumps up at somebody who then thinks he's given them the virus.
I have that with my daughter for a walk, and we live by the river path, and more of it looks like a canal, but it's technically a river, and then we walk along it, and there's so many bikes, and so my life is just like, oh my God, is my daughter about to be ploughed down every second? Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's sort of new odd stresses that have come about. Yeah, very specific to this time.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing we've been talking about before as well, which is to try and counter that, try and look at the things that you don't need to feel anxious about. But sometimes, in periods of social distance, there are other things which are not, the anxiety. So sometimes going into that imagination of, hang on a minute, what was I anxious about in February? Do you remember that Tuesday with that worry and that worry and that worry? And hopefully you can find, I know it's hard to find some equilibrium now, but I think that exercise, I've found that quite useful every now and again.
Robin, I have to ask you, what's that big thing resting on the door behind you?
Oh, what? There?
Yeah, the 4 foot tall. Oh, no, it's that. Oh, it's a microphone, but it looks like it's.
No, that's a telescope.
Oh,
wow.
Of course, that's the thing where it must have been about my 40th birthday, maybe a little bit later than that. I used to talk about this when my son was 2 years old, right? So my wife had bought a lovely surprise. That was the big surprise, right? And keep it top secret. Can't believe it. And it's been fantastic. I've been so lucky to have that. There's a window up there, and it's very hard to manage to get the angle right. But looking at the moon and really Venus and those things,
planets just with the naked eye at the moment. So having a telescope would be incredible.
Oh yeah, and as Chris Lintott said the other day as well, if people are, binoculars are very good. If the first time when you're first doing astronomy, if you can get it very cheaply, you can get a. But yeah, so what happened was one day my wife was saying, "What do you want for your birthday lunch?" And I said, "Oh, I don't mind anything." She went, No. What do you want? Come on, what do you want? I went, "No, honestly, I'm fine. I don't." And that bit where just tell me. What do you want? And I turned to my son. I said, "Oh, what should I have for my birthday lunch?" And he went, "A telescope." And I went that, and I realised I said. That doesn't sound very delicious. He went, "It is a telescope." So that was that, and there was that lovely moment where, and what was amazing was my wife later on said, "I don't even know how he knew it was a telescope because I didn't tell him." So it turns out he's been spying on us like children of the damned. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We better go because it's 11 o'clock.
And now I'm just going to get Mouse to come and say hello.
Oh, yeah, because it's
Trent just messaged me. Hello, what's this?
So, hang on, 11 and we're going. Are we not throwing back to Luke?
Oh, yeah, we're going to throw back to Luke right at the end. No, I just meant we're kind of, Yeah, don't worry about that. So thanks very much everyone for watching. We're going to, don't forget there's the tip jar and all that stuff at the bottom as well. I think I'm doing something. There's a nice little club just outside Hastings called the Bavard Bar, I think it's Bavard Bar. And as far as I know, I'm doing something for them tonight at about 8 o'clock or 8:30. I'm doing a thing. I think it's lots of kind of little mini lectures and stuff. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I learned about psychology. Not so much when I wrote the book, but when I I missed it. Oh. I was
no.
Again. It was
It's
a
wrangling.
lovely. Can I say though, a lovely presence just during some of those moments.
Oh, I've lost him.
Oh well,
I pulled my mic out trying to find the dog. He's run off.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
It's all
poetry is much more important.
So
less exciting.
If at any point it does return in shot, then Luke, you'll have a split screen at that moment. Okay, you'll be doing your poetry, but there will be also canine appreciation for your iambic pentameter as well. Not that I know you may well not be using that today. It's your choice. But Sarah, thank you so much. And people, Sarah's book, Sex, Power, Money and Animal. If you've not read either of them, they're really worth reading. They're filmed, and Sex, Power, Money is such a funny. The introduction to that, I think you captured so well that being your voice, but also being able to read. Sometimes that divide between the stand-up voice and actually going, oh, you can't read this as a book. You capture that being talked to by you so brilliantly in that book. So I'd highly recommend it.
Robin. Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
Yeah.
See you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for doing it.
Josie, what's your plans for today?
I'm doing a streaming gig at 2 p.m. with my daughter in tow. I have to write a song for I'm being a part of an online Eurovision Song Contest with Johnny. We're being North Macedonia, so we need to get our song finished and recorded. So it's a very busy day for me. What about you?
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Well, I'm just thinking Bavard Bar thing tonight, and then I'm talking to someone about general relativity at midday, because that's one of my habits. As you know, I'm trying to escape human reality by looking merely at cosmological reality. It's been a tremendous relief. Oh, there we are. I'm back in shot. Oh, that everyone
Little
loves us.
mouse. What a good boy.
Good boy.
And weirdly enough, that's what normally is done for Luke at the end of a poem. He's also given a little biscuit as well. So very the Pavlovian poet. Thanks very much, everyone. But as we mentioned, the tip jar at the bottom as well. And also Wednesday night, James Acaster and Ed Gamble are going to be doing some stuff also on the. Is it next week?
Yeah, they're going to do off-menu podcast with Roisin Connaughty, which would be wonderful.
So that's next Wednesday, Off Menu Podcast, James Acaster, Ed Gamble, Roisin Connaughty, as part of the Shambles Stay at Home Festival. Don't forget the tip jar if you do happen to have a for lots of people, and hopefully lots of different art centres as well, to make sure there's places for us to go when we're allowed out again. Hand over to you. Luke, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Here is Luke Wright with the final poem.
It's about me missing the naughtier side of my personality. It's called Bring Me My Devil. This virus saw my devil off and left me in the tutelage of my best self, who turns out to be an archbishop, a haughty health fanatic, a McEwan smug lecturer and rimless half-moons, hell-bent on teaching me the names of trees or marching me across the April fields, ruddy as a camper. Look, a copse. Now life is one long limber up in gym shorts with a tidy hem. I'm wading through a swamp of sourdough, playing chess by second-class post, blinded by order, bleached as pale as the concrete walls of a Soviet-era theatre. God, I miss my devil, shitting like a barn owl down my back, whispering his slanders in my ear. You wouldn't catch him clapping for the nurses or mucking in or queuing for the co-op. Hell no. He'll be in some dive bar now, out there in the Shadowlands, some place beyond our squeaky comprehension. But when they click the combination lock and set us free, I'll send for him. I'll drag him flailing from his cups and dunk him in the horse's trough. I'll scream for him to do his worst to me, line him up and get him out, unspool my weeks of hearty labour, piss on all the ledgers of my soul. Oh, someone bring my devil back to me in a hot throng of leaking bodies, in shared saliva at rank urinals, in dark places thick with lockdown dust, to rob me of my dreamless sleep, to feed me saturated fats, to mock me as I vomit on my boots and leave me spent and drooling on a stranger's blim-popped Oxfam couch.
Oh.